ॐ ॐ सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्. So any questions, clarifications? We completed the third chapter last time. Any questions on anything that we have done up to now? Even if there are questions from an earlier class, no issues. All clear? Come on guys, respond. Is it all clear to all of you? Any questions or doubts? All clear? Yeah. Good. Okay. Then we are going to start the fourth chapter today. It is called Jnanena Karma Sannyasaha. Therefore, Jnana Karma Sannyasaha. All true sannyasa is negation, giving up of your ignorance, giving up of the ahankara. Okay? So that is in terms of knowledge only. It cannot be an action. It cannot be an action. Okay? It cannot be a ritual. It cannot be an action. So let us start that. It starts, Krishna does not wait for a question from Arjuna. He starts straight off. Okay? He starts straight off. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Aham Avyayam Vivasvan Manave Prahu Manuhu Ishvakave Bravit Evam Parampara Praptam Idam Imam Rajarshyo Viduhu Se Kale Neha Mahata Yogo Nashta Parantapaha. Okay. Now here he is saying, he is establishing the parampara of knowledge. Okay. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, the Lord says, what does he say? Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Aham Avyayam. I, as Ishvara, gave this knowledge to Vivasvan. Vivasvan is Surya Devata. Okay? Vivasvan. Okay. And Vivasvan Manave Praha taught it to Manu, the first lawgiver. Manu was a wise person. Okay? A lot of criticism that you hear about Manu Dharma Shastra is not valid because they are said by people who don't know what Manu was. Manu is blamed for a lot of stuff, especially patriarchal views, anti-woman attitudes. They are not true. Okay? In fact, I remember when I was a local guardian to 3-4 kids, and their teacher told them in the college that Manu did not encourage widow remarriage. He looked down upon it, which is not true at all. In fact, Manu gives 7 conditions for anyone to remarry. Okay. So, that way there is a lot of misconceptions about Manu. Therefore, Vivasvan Manave Praha. He talked now to Manuhu. Manuhu Ishvakave Abravit. Manu taught it to Ishvaku. Ishvaku was the founder of Rama's dynasty. Okay? Yeah, of Rama's dynasty is what? Okay. Evam Parampara Praptamimam. Evam by Parampara of teacher-student. He says, Imam Raja Rishiyoho Viduhu. The Raja Rishis came to know of it. One parampara where it is not the priestly class who got this knowledge, not the Brahmanas who got this knowledge. Raja Rishis, those who were king and rishis. Who's a rishi? Rishanti, Atanti, Jnananti iti Rishi. The one who knows the truth is called a Rishi. Rishanti iti. That means what? Atanti. Atanti meaning Jnananti. Okay. Therefore, one who knows the truth. Therefore, the Rishis got it. The Raja Rishis. And they were also kings. Rajanam sya, Rishiyascha. They were both kings. They were warriors. At the same time, they were kings. Therefore, it's the Kshatriya Parampara. Okay. Brahma Vidya is not only a Brahmana Parampara. It's also a Kshatriya Parampara. And there are places where it was also among the Shudras and the Vaishyas. Okay. So there are a lot of Paramparas. This is knowledge is not based on the caste system. Okay. I want you all to be very clear about it. Yeah. Sakalena Mahata. In a long period of time. Why? Because there were some 60, 70 kings in Rama's dynasty. In Ishwaku's dynasty, there were 60, 70 kings. Each one ruled for a long, long time. Okay. After that, the Luna dynasty took over. And again, long line. And now it has come to Arjuna. So he says, in this long period of time, it looked as though this knowledge was lost. It is not lost. Why? I am giving it to you right now. And after Arjuna, Mahata Kalaha, a lot of time has passed. Okay? Minimum 3,500 years or more. 5,000 years have passed from Arjuna's time to now. But it is not really lost. Why? All of you are getting it right now. If all of you are getting it right now, how can it be really lost? It looked lost because it was not in mainstream society. It was there as an undercurrent only. Okay. Therefore, this happens whenever a nation goes through an upheaval. Some of these things goes hidden. And when the time of peace, etc. comes, it becomes mainstream again. And then he is saying, say evayam maya te adhya yoga prokta puratanaha bhaktosi me sakha cheti rasyam yetaduttamam. Say eva ayam. This same knowledge that was taught by me to Ishwaku, Manu, etc., that whole parampara, that knowledge, he says, adhya, te yogaha, adhya, proktaha purantanaha yogaha, that ancient knowledge, I am telling you right now, today. Bhaktosi me, because you are my bhakta. Sakha cheti, you are my buddy, you are my friend. Iti. Rahasyam etad uttamam. This is a rahasyam. It's secret knowledge actually. In what way secret? In what way secret? It is secret because it has to be revealed. What is a secret? It remains a secret until it is revealed. The moment it is revealed, it is no more a secret. So similarly, this knowledge, it has to be revealed by someone who knows to people who don't know. Once that is done, it is no more secret. Until then, it is secret. Until you come to it, it is secret to you. Until you come to this knowledge, it remains a secret to you. You don't know. The moment you come and you learn, then you know. It is no more secret. It is revealed to you. And he adds two words, bhakta asicha sakha cheti. Because you are my friend and also my devotee. To show there is no hidden agenda. This knowledge is not taught with any agenda at all. There is no agenda in teaching this knowledge. Anyone who seeks it sincerely is given. Nobody is kept away from this knowledge by any reason, by any cause. It's not elitist. Of course, certain qualifications are always mentioned. That if you want to know, you should know that, be this, be this. That's not to make it elitist, that is to ensure that you will get it properly, that you will understand it without any subjectivity, any misinterpretation, etc. For that sake, it is said. Okay? Clear up to now? It's simple verses. Right? Okay, then let us go ahead. Now, Arjuna gets a question. I mean, a question that can happen for anyone. Because remember, Krishna was around Arjuna. Krishna was only a year or two older than Arjuna. Okay? Couple of years older than Arjuna. That is all. Therefore, Arjuna asks. Okay? Arjuna vacha aparam bhavato janmaha param janma vivasvataha gatam etad vijaniyam tvam ado proktavaniti. Arjuna vacha. Arjuna asks what? Aparam bhavato janma. Your janma, birth, is recent. Abhi ho gaya. Is recent, just now. Yeah. I know. My mother, your aunt has told me when you were born. You have seen your horoscope. It looks like a horoscope. If you look at Krishna's horoscope, it looks like a horoscope. People are coming to kill him ever since he was a baby. Okay? Therefore, aparam bhavato janma. Your janma is recent. Param janma vivasvataha. Vivasvan was born where? At the beginning of the time. At the beginning of this era he was born. Vivasvan was born there. Katadetad vijaniyam. How am I to understand? Tvam ado proktavaniti. That you are taught right from the beginning. That you are the source of this knowledge in this kalpa. That you are the source. How am I to know that? Remember, whenever, this is one thing all of you have to keep in mind, then you will not get doubts like this. Whenever Krishna speaks in the Gita, except for one place, okay, Krishna always speaks from the standpoint of Ishvara. Understand this? Of Bhagavan. Whether you believe Ishvara is Bhagavan or not, for the time being I am not debating it. Okay? I'll let you hold your beliefs. That is the standpoint in the Gita. Therefore, whenever he is saying, I have taught right, means as Bhagavan he has taught. As Ishvara. That's why I recite that verse before we start. Sadashiva Samarambha. Starting from Sadashiva himself, from Bhagavan himself. Or Narayanam Padmabhuvam Vasishtam Satkincha Tatputra Parasharancha. Another line. Another parampara. The whole thing is from Bhagavan only, Ishvara only. Therefore, okay, that is the viewpoint. But here Krishna using this opportunity to introduce the idea of avatar. Okay? Avatara, not the movie, okay? Avatara in terms of avatarati. Okay? Of Bhagavan manifesting himself in a human form. Introducing that idea, he gives you a different standpoint. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Bahune me vyatitani janmani tavacha Arjuna tanyaham veda sarvani natvam veda parantapaha. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, Bhagavan says what? Bahune me vyatitani janmani. Bahuni janmani me vyatitani. A lot of janmas of mine have gone before. Bodhga. Okay. Tavacha Arjuna. Yours also. You also have been born again and again right from the beginning of the kalpa. You have been keeping on being born. Sometimes human, sometimes animal, sometimes beggar, sometimes prince. Lot of things are gone. Tanyaham Veda Sarvani. I remember all of them, he says. This only Krishna can say, okay? A local teacher cannot say he remembers everyone. I remember a few, but not all of them, okay? Not even one can say. Tanya Veda Aham Sarvani. I remember all of them. Natvam Veda Parantapaha. You don't remember it. Okay? You don't remember it. Then, alright, okay Baba. Then he is giving you further explanation. Ajopi san avyavayatma bhutanam ishvaropi san prakritim swam adhisthaya sambhavami atma mayaya. This now may be a little bit of belief coming into the picture, but logical belief, not illogical. Okay? Ajaha api. Even though really speaking, I am unborn, I am nothing but pure consciousness. Okay, I am nothing but pure consciousness. Ajaha api, son. Okay? Avyavayatma. Something that cannot decline, cannot change in time. Bhutanam Ishvaropicha. Even though I am the Lord of all beings, Lord of the whole creation, I am the one from whom the whole creation is manifest. Prakritim swam adhishtaya. By keeping my prakriti, my maya under my own control, sambhavatmi atma maya, I manifest myself. By my own maya, I manifest myself as an individual within the creation. Now this is the basis for understanding an avatara. An avatara is not born because of karma. You and I are born because of karma. And we go through lifetimes because of various karmas that we have done. Okay. Whereas Ishvara's birth is purely mayikam, by keeping maya under control. Okay. Now, people may find it a bit difficult to understand, to accept. Okay. If the whole universe can be manifest from Ishvara through Maya Shakti, what is the problem of one special form being manifest? What is the problem? The whole universe can be manifest, but you can't accept that he can manifest one special form, correct? Why special form? Because special purpose. Yeah. So, when Krishna undergoes something, when Rama underwent something, when Parashurama underwent something, you cannot say it is because of their past karma. It is not because of their past karma. It is purely because of choice on Bhagavan's part. There is something to be handled, something to be done. What is it that is to be done? If you understand the purpose, it may be easier to accept it. He says the purpose here. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bharata abhyuttanam adharmasya tadatmanam srujamyaham paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya dushkrutam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Here the purpose. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati. Hey Bharata. Oh, Bharatiya. One was born in this land of Bharata. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati. Whenever dharma is on a decline. Okay. Abhyuttanam adharmasya. And adharma is on the surge. Dharma is downward, adharma is surging up. Tada atmanam srujamyaham. At that time, I manifest myself. For what reason? Paritranaya cha sadhunam. For the protection of good people. Sadhu here means good. Sadhu, the meaning of the word sadhu is a good person. Okay? A good person. Any good person can be called a sadhu. Therefore, don't use the expression good sadhu after this, okay? Sadhu generally means good. Minimum qualification to be called sadhu is you have to be a good human being. Okay? Therefore, for good human beings, paritranaya, vinashaya cha dushkritam. Dushkritam vinashaya cha, and for the destruction of the evil, of the evildoers, the wrongdoers, dharma samsthapanarthaya, to re-establish dharma again, sambhavami yuge yuge, I am born in yuga after yuga, I am manifest myself again and again. Then Swamiji, why is he not born now? Itna terrorism hai, ye hai, oh hai, is there something that we can handle? Okay. How hard it is? But someone has sent us this thing, how hard it is to mute yourself. Correct? All those people who want to talk to your maids or your cooks or whoever is there at home, please mute your mic before you do that. Otherwise, a disturbance for the class. Okay. Therefore, he says, I am manifest again and again for this purpose. The local problems that we face, we can tackle it. It only requires some political will, which is there right now in the country. Whether terrorism sponsored by Pakistan or whether it's an incursion by China, etc., we can handle it. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. Someone has asked a question, if everything happens by the will of Ishvara, why is there adharma in the first place? Did I ever tell you everything is there by the will of Ishvara? Did I say that at any time? Can you point out any class where I have said that? This is our other readings you have picked up, which is okay, which is fine. I have not said it. Look at it. Ishvara has set up the infrastructure, the order of creation. After that, things evolve. In that, human beings have been given total free will. The free will is so much that for free will to be really free, you should be able to abuse it. Okay? You should be able to abuse it. Only if it is subject, if the possibility of abuse exists, can you call it free will? You can be able to abuse it, then it is subject to be called free will. Otherwise, it is not free will. See, that's why free will, we all have free will to put the mic as we want. I will make a request, please mute it. But people have the free will to abuse it. Can you see? This is how adharma also happens. Why? Because the free will is abused. And when the free will is abused, adharma happens. Now I know there are disturbances. I am working on a solution for this. At the same time, I don't want people to be disturbed more than necessary by reacting to these noises. Okay? If you react to the noises, you are even more disturbed. So, please don't do that. Okay? Yeah. Not worth it. So, imagine that we are having a class in a place where there are some disturbing noises. Okay? And learn to handle it in your stride with samatvam, with balance. Okay. All right. Therefore, this is where the whole thing happens. He says. This is the whole purpose. The purpose. And what was the adharma in the time of the Mahabharata? See, when he came as Rama, is very clear. Ravana had to be destroyed, and no human being could do that. Who was the great adharmi in Krishna's time? Can anyone respond? Who was the great adharmi? Okay, someone has said Kamsa. Yes, to an extent correct. But it was not only Kamsa. No, it is not only Duryodhana. It is not only Jarasandha. Now, can you see? You can name at least 100. That means what? Very interesting. Remember, Krishna appeared. To an extent, Sugandh is right. Yeah. Okay, I got your answers. Now, relax up. Krishna came at the end of which yuga? Treta Yuga, exactly. And Kali Yuga is supposed to have started after his death. When Krishna left the world, after that Kali Yuga is supposed to have started. Okay? Therefore, that Krishna's Janma is to the end of a Yuga. The end of a Yuga is always one of turmoil. At that point, okay, the Kshatriya thinking itself had become a problem. The rulers, all the Kshatriyas themselves, if you look at the people who supported the Pandavas, they were only 7 at Kauni, 7 battalions, whereas 11 were supporting the Kauravas. That means out of 18 kings in this whole Bharatavarsha, 18 kings, 11 were on the side of the Kauravas, only 7 were on the side of Pandavas. Therefore, it is time now for a mass upheaval. It is almost like a mass destruction. It is almost like a mass destruction. Most of the existing kingdoms of that land, of the land, out of 18 kingdoms, 11 kingdoms had to be finished off. After that, Kali Yuga starts naturally, because there is a decline in the whole cultural thing. That's one of the consequences of it. That's the consequences of it. But that was his job. So Krishna's job is not an easy job. In fact, it is one of the tough jobs. Don't worry, at the end of Kali Yuga, when Kalki Avatara happens, the destruction will be even greater. The destruction will be even greater. Yeah. But we will not be alive to see it. If you gain moksha, no problems. Otherwise, some other Janma of ours, we will have to see it. Okay? Better get your moksha first. Okay. Better be on track and get it first. Therefore, this was Krishna's job. The end of a yuga. The end of a time. The end of an era. The end of a yuga, actually. So it is a huge responsibility. I know one modern guru said this. He's a very famous man. Okay, but unfortunately, his knowledge of the Shastra is very limited. And the tragedy is he prides himself that he is not educated in the Shastra. That's the unfortunate part. But he's a very logical, sensible speaker. That part of it I like about him. So he said, Krishna's job was to spiritualize politics. And if you look at it, his life was a failure. This is said without understanding of what Yuga Dharma is, what Avatara is. This is not true. He is definitely born with this purpose. He has manifested himself with a purpose to destroy all the adharmic kings. That's all. And that that worked out well also. That worked out well. So for the purpose he was born, that was achieved. Therefore, it's successful. Yeah. Yeah. Along with that, lot of good things also died. Yes. Yes. Just imagine if the knowledge of all the astras, etc., were there now in people's hands, and the terrorist gets hold of all of them. My God, you had a problem on your hands. You won't be able to handle it. Yeah, won't be able to handle it. Yeah. Yeah, none of us will be able to handle it. It will become so huge, the problem. Therefore, certain things have to end. And then when Satya Yuga starts again at the end of Kali Yuga, when Satya Yuga starts, the whole knowledge comes back, will be manifested again. That's how it is. All in Indian thinking or Oriental thinking, creation is cyclic in nature. It is not linear as in the Western thinking. It's always cyclic. And that seems more logical because if you look at the cosmos, whether it is an atom or a planet, it's always cyclic. Okay, always not, it's cyclic. Yeah. Yes, before Satya Yuga starts, there will be Pralaya. Water world. Okay. It has to be there. That's the destruction. Yeah. That has to be there. Yeah. So that's where the whole thing goes on. So any questions about up to here? About the Avatara theory? Any question or any clarification? Please ask now. Because I am not going to revisit this topic very often. All clear? Any question? Should? Some. Who's asking this? Do you have the free will to ask this question? And you think free will is not there in Indian thought? We should be a bunch of idiots if we don't accept free will. I mean, how can you be held responsible for your karma if there is no free will? If I walk into a bank cashier, okay, into a bank, and I hold a gun at the cashier's head and say, open the safe for me to take out all the money, can the cashier be held responsible for giving me the money? No court of law will hold him responsible. Why? The gun at his head, yeah, what can he do? There is no free will. I have eradicated the free will he had. The gun in my hand has taken care of his free will. So even in such cases, even though there is a free will there, somebody like me may just choose to knock him off. He doesn't have the skill for it. Okay? So even in such cases when he is not held responsible, do you think a donkey will get karma if he kicks a human being? Papa of kicking? Can he be held responsible? No, no. Can you be held responsible for kicking somebody and injuring someone? That means what? Yeah. See, remember one thing. The Indian, I am glad you asked this question because it helped me to raise a bigger point. When you say the Shastra, the Indian texts reveal reality. They don't propose a theory. The Shastra, the Gita, the Upanishads are revealing a reality of life. They are not proposing a theory. It is not like Western philosophies, which are all theories, which you can imply in society, which you can apply to the society, see whether it works or doesn't work. Like, for example, capitalism is a Western theory. You can apply to the society and see whether it works or not. It seems to be working to a degree, etc., but a lot of limitations are there. Communism is West theory. Again, Western. Communism is not Chinese. Maoism is Chinese. But that's an offshoot of the Western Karl Marx thinking. It's failing all over the world. Socialism, again Western theory. Welfare states. Failing in most places unless the population is very limited and the society is highly advanced. Highly developed. Not advanced, developed. Where they don't need it anyway. So, these are theories. You apply it. Theories of political thought, where you apply it to a society, see whether it works, doesn't work, partially, whatever modifications is that. And it develops by what? Thesis. You propound something, then there is an antithesis, and a synthesis comes in, isn't it? Capitalism is a thesis, communism is the antithesis, then you have a synthesis, socialism. Correct? Then that synthesis itself becomes a thesis for an antithesis, and then again there will be a synthesis. This is how evolution of thought takes place in Western philosophy. Yeah. Indian thinking is not like that. Not the Vedic thinking. By Indian thinking, I mean the Vedic thinking. There are political thoughts that has come up. They are the Smritis, the Niti Shastras, etc. But Niti Shastra is not about capitalism or socialism or anything like that in India. Niti Shastra is the dharma of the rulers. The dharma of the citizens is entirely a different thing. Why? We respected free will in human beings. Free will is a given in our thinking. In Indian thinking, free will is a given. And given that free will, you will talk about duties and responsibilities of every individual, of every role, of every functionary. Duties and responsible of traders, commerce, people in service, ruling, judiciary. We will talk of duties and responsibilities within the free will. Therefore, the whole thing is based on free will. Now, if something is based on free will, remember, very interesting. Is communism based on free will? Exactly. You cannot have free will in communism. Capitalism? There is free will. Yes. But then that's the problem. If there is free will, you need dharma to guide it. Otherwise, it can be abused. Therefore, in the West, they have tried to evolve some guidelines, no? Anti-monopoly laws. Correct? Yeah, anti-monopoly. What is that? Trying to restrict that free will to a certain direction to prevent it from being abused. Not restricting free will, you are only restricting the ability to be that abuse part of it. So here we presented it as duties and responsibilities so that there will be no abuse as far as possible. And if there was abuse, that was considered a crime, Therefore, there was a punishment. But the punishment also in the Indian system was very different. The punishment was, in the Indian system, you make amends. You have disturbed the balance in the society, now you bring the balance back into the society. Yes. Therefore, the whole system was very, very different. Okay, now I can go on endlessly on that, but this is not a class on Niti Shastra or Artha Shastra. This is a class on Vedanta Shastra. Okay, therefore I am not elaborating more than this. This much is good to have so that everyone gets an idea of what it's about. And back to Vedanta in terms of this avatara. Okay, so the avatara is born without karma. The avatara is born with a purpose. The avatara has to, and that purpose would be to re-establish dharma and destroy dharma, etc. This is the purpose for which an avatara manifests itself. And if Ishvara can manifest this whole creation, he can manifest himself in a special form. When does it become necessary? It becomes necessary when human beings are no more capable of handling the problem. As long as human beings are capable of handling the problem, no avatara will manifest. Now the problem in India is we like to deify people. We like to worship people. Put them on a pedestal and worship them. Why? The moment you do that, you don't have to follow them. No? You don't have to become like anything like them. We can continue to be our useless, idiotic self. Therefore, anyone comes, you'll make him an avatara. Sai Baba. He did phenomenal things. Brought water to 400 villages, which what the Andhra government couldn't do, he did. Andhra government put up his hand and said, we can't do this. He said, I will do it. And he did it. Purely on voluntary donations of people. This is Indian socialism, okay? Sadhus become nimittas sometimes. Sadhus, holy men, whatever, can become nimittas like that for socialism to happen. He did it. But to follow him means we'll have to do something. Na? Put him as an avatara. Problem nahi hai na. He is God. He can do it. I can't do it. I don't have to do it. Anyone comes. Avataras. If you want to know Vishnu avatars, there are only 10 of them. The 10th one is yet to come. The Bhagavatam talks about all of them. Bhavishya Purana talks about the 10th one also. Read it. That's it. There are no others. Others are out of your respect and adulation, you are calling them as avatars. You can if you want to. That's your choice. The Shastra talks only about these 10. Okay? Shastra talks only about these 10. If you want to talk, you are ashastrik. But hey, India is a free country. You have the freedom to talk any stuff you want. There is a couple in Bangalore who claims to be Kalki Avatara and things like that also. Correct? All of you, some of you have heard of them? Yeah. Kalki Avatara is supposed to be a warrior. This couple has not seen a weapon in their lives except the kitchen knife. So there is where the whole thing goes. Clear up to now? Any questions? No. Okay. We'll go ahead. And before I go ahead, one important point to be maintained here is that Krishna himself talks about the Guru Sishya Parampara. Okay. Krishna himself, sorry, Sugandh, I didn't get that question. What is the question? Yeah. No, 10 of them have been given special status by calling them avatara. Okay. See, nimittas, alright. Let me talk it. little bit elaborated, since that is the topic anyway in the Gita for today. When Ishvara himself is manifest, we call it an avatara. Nimittas are the reason because of which he is manifest. So the word nimitta cannot be used for avatara. The word nimitta can be used for you and me. We can become nimitta for change. We can be nimitta for some good. Like Hitler was nimitta for something very bad. So nimittas are there. And again, every one of us can be a nimitta. In fact, all of us are nimittas in our own life for bringing about some good, some change, etc. Okay. Arjuna was a nimitta for the Pandavas to win the war. In fact, in the 12th chapter, he says, Nimitta matram bhava savya sachin. He says that. Nimitta means a reason. There are avatars and any special guy among the human beings who has done some fantastic work. Okay. They can be called Yuga Purushas. You say, na, the man of the centenary. Do you not use this expression in English? The man of the moment, the woman of the century, expressions of like that are there. Therefore, they are called Yuga Purushas. Swami Vivekananda was a Yuga Purusha. Ramakrishna was a Yuga Purusha, you can say. You can't call them avatars, really speaking. But we worship, you can. Any person who is no more living, who doesn't have an ahankara, can be worshipped. That's not a problem. That's not a problem. The problem of worship is, look, after that I stop following him. I stop following, I only worship. I admire, I adore, I don't do, or I don't walk the path of what he did. That I don't do. That is the problem of putting people on pedestals. Another thing I want to point out is, Krishna talking about right in the beginning, the importance of the parampara. It is the Guru Sishya parampara that kept the learning going. It is the Guru Sishya parampara that made this knowledge available to everyone. If it is available to all of you in the same form without corruption, that's the important thing. See, when a philosophy is transmitted, it may get corrupted. It may get modified. Okay? It may get modified, corrupted, etc. because of the people bringing their own ideas into it, bringing their own subjectivity into it. In Vedanta, that corruption is not there. Because Vedanta is not presenting a theory. I want all of you to understand that this is not just a random statement I am making without a text. Okay? This is very, very important. I want every one of you to pay attention here very clearly. Vedanta is not the presentation of a theory for someone to be practicing. Vedanta is revealing the true nature of what you are. Therefore, there is a text which reveals it, and there is a methodology for teaching. At higher levels of learning, the methodology will automatically be imbibed along with the learning. Like when you go to an ashram, it is not a teacher's training course. When you go to Kaivalya Dham, they have 1 year yoga teacher's training course. That is fine for yoga. When it comes to Vedanta, when we go to Coimbatore ashram or we go to Rishikesh ashram, it is not a teacher's training course. You are learning the Shastra. And what is the Shastra saying? What you really are. Therefore, you have to validate what the Shastra is saying. Really speaking, you are a teacher only if you have validated what the Shastra is saying about yourself. What the Shastra is saying, you have validated, you say yes, in harmony with the Shastra, you can say yes, that is true. And that process of validating will happen only when it happens. Along with that learning, you will also pick up the methodology of teaching, of unfolding, because there's a process in how the words are handled. Not in today's topic. In today's topic was very descriptive. So in today's topic, there's no unfoldment. There's only some explanation. But when I'm dealing with this Atma Swarupa, etc., there's a certain methodology of unfoldment. Maybe right now it's too early for you all to recognize it. But when you learn a little bit more, you will learn to recognize the methodology of unfoldment that comes along with the Shastra. Along with the learning it comes. So at levels of learning, you will always pick up the methodology of unfoldment, of pointing out how the truth is. That has to be validated by yourself. You have to say, in harmony with the Shastra, you also have to say, yes, I am that consciousness, limitlessness. And then you're teaching what? That the other person who's coming to you is consciousness, limitless. So in this process, the original message, the Upanishads, cannot get corrupted. There is no way. Can you all hear me now clearly? Yeah. So I know for a second it went off. Now in this way of presenting, there can be no way in which the original message can get corrupted. Therefore, the knowledge of Vedanta you get today is the same that was taught to Ishvaku by Manu. Or rather, other way around. Ishvaku taught it to Manu. The same knowledge. The knowledge is the same. Yes, language may change. Examples may change. Logic may be different. Some new forms of logic may be there. But the core remains uncorrupted. This is the only system in the world which really happens that way, where the core remains uncorrupted. Because the methodology that has evolved around it. Because if the methodology gets corrupted, there's no way you're going to know the truth. You will find in society there are some modern teachers. They are great souls, I respect them. For example, Eckhart Tolle, Mooji, etc. They are non-traditional teachers. Therefore, when you hear them, you know up to a point they have understood, beyond that they have not. Up to the fact I am Sakshi, the witness of everything, they have understood and they can explain that very well. Beyond that, they cannot explain. When you hear them, you will understand more than what they have said. Why? Because you know the methodology to an extent. You have heard the tradition. Because you have heard the tradition, you will hear them or read them and say, my God is speaking Vedanta only. When I hear them, I know where they are lacking. That is why a teacher who is non-traditional like that cannot create another teacher. Whereas in the tradition, the Guru Sishya Parampara goes on. For thousands of years it has been going on. Thousands of years. Why? It's available to me right now here. Available to you. So every student becomes a shining link in the parampara and the chain. So this ongoing is possible. Yeah, that's the beauty of the whole thing. That's the beauty of the whole thing without corruption. Otherwise, anything like this can get corrupted. Anything can get corrupted. I've studied other systems where I know from the original to this, they will call it the old system of Nyaya, the new system of Nyaya. Why? Because it has modified itself. I've studied systems like that, where things have got changed over the time. Yeah. Nyaya, Navya Nyaya, for example, they will say. Old system, new system, that'll happen. So like that, there are Neo Vedantins also. Neo Vedantin is a left-handed compliment, okay? It's almost abusive. You say the Neo Vedantin, means there's no Vedanta in it. When you talk about transcending the mind and this and then, not Vedanta. There's not understanding. There's no pramana. One way of you all recognizing if somebody is a traditional teacher or not is, does he present Vedanta as a pramana or does he present it as theory and practice? If he presents it as theory and practice, it is not in harmony with the tradition, it is not in harmony with the sampradaya, the methodology of teaching. If he is presenting it as a pramana, as a means of knowledge, pramana is not authority, etc. Pramanam, pramakaranam. If he is presenting Vedanta as a means of knowledge to know the truth without depending on practice, etc., then you know he is a traditional teacher. Now, a traditional teacher may give you all some practices because individually you may require something. That's a different game. That is to prepare the mind. All practices are for preparing the mind, not for knowing the truth. So the truth to be known, the pramana has to work directly. Like Arjuna's case, all the practice that necessary for mastering the mind, he had done it before. Maharati he was. You don't become a Maharati without mastering your mind. No way. No way. So that was done. That was a given. Therefore, he needed only the teaching. And at the end of the Gita, he says, my moha and my delusion is gone. The Gandiva that slipped from my hand leaves back into my hand. It leaves back into my hand. Let us roll. Battle awaits. Let us roll. Let us not keep Lord Yama waiting anymore. Let us not keep Lord Yama waiting anymore. Let's go. Let's go. He says that. No problems. Absolutely no issues. Yeah. So that is a thing. That is a parampara that Krishna has been highlighting by saying, I as Ishvara taught it to Ishwaku, taught it to Vaivasvan, Vaivasvan taught it to Ishwaku, Ishwaku taught it to Manu. All that, the parampara, or Manu taught it to Ishwaku. All the parampara goes on. The parampara goes on because, look at it. Why do you have to bring Bhagwan into the picture? Why do you want to bring Ishvara into the picture? Because the knowledge has to come from a source that does not have ignorance. And anyone born on earth is born ignorant. Therefore, the knowledge has to come from a source which is not ignorant. That is Ishvara himself, nobody else. All knowledge anyway is from Ishvara because knowledge is of what he is. So from where the source of the things that have come in the world is, the same source should be the source of the knowledge of the thing also. That's why if there is a God, you will never know God unless God himself reveals to you. That's why every religion claims to be from God, whether it's through Son of God, Prophet of God, etc., etc., etc. And one champion said, I am the last. How do you the last? God didn't say that, he is saying it. He has got some vested interest. Because he doesn't want anyone to change his words. We don't have that issue. Look at it. Look at the difference. A message coming from God can get changed. Therefore, this guy said, I am the last. Don't change my words. Even interpretation not allowed. You don't have that issue. This is a methodology of teaching. As long as the methodology is there, you don't get corrupted. Lifestyle, etc. can change. Of course, it can change. That's lifestyle. That belongs to Dharma. It belongs to Niti. It does not belong to Vedanta. So Dharma will keep changing according to time, circumstances, etc. And that is fine. Let it change. Ways of living will change. Let it change. Even the orthodox Brahmana families that says we are following traditional cooking do not eat food that was mentioned in the Vedas. They are very strict. Onion, garlic and brinjals they will not touch. Correct? Those who are Brahminical here. But that's not Vedic cooking. Vedic cooking is what the priest insists that you do when you have your Shraddha ceremony at home. No chilies are used. Pepper is used instead. So even that you are not following. Why? Because things will change and it is appropriate that it is changing. Tomatoes are not used because tomato is an import. So Vedic cooking tomatoes are not there. Potatoes are not there because that has also come from outside. These things will change. And let it change. It doesn't matter. What does it matter? It's good to have change. Why? Potatoes and now we are talking in terms of pasta and Chinese food and things like that. No? Okay. If you are so patriotic that you want to, what do you call, have nothing to do with Chinese, the Chinese food in India is Indian Chinese, okay? It is not Chinese. So you can eat it without guilt. The original Chinese cooking you will not be able to eat. Even vegetarian you will not be able to eat. Anyway, those jokes apart, the parampara of learning has to be kept. Okay? The parampara maintains the purity of the knowledge. Therefore, you can be assured that you get it without any corruption. The knowledge in pristine purity, you get it exactly like how the rishis of old got it. Therefore, to be a Vedanta student or a Vedanta acharya is not a small thing, okay? It's not a small thing, it's a big thing. Okay? Why Vedanta student also is a big thing? Why? Because the student becomes acharya. No? Every student is a potential acharya. Therefore, it's a big thing, not a small thing. Okay? So keep that sense of sacredness in yourself when you learn, and we'll see more of this in the next class. Om Tat Sat.